See, belonging is important to all of us, and belonging for me gives you a sense of comfort, a sense of validation, and it allows you then, I think, with that sense of comfort and validation, to take risks. As I say, belonging is about being, but life is also about becoming. Yeah, it's about, and the only way, and it's a bit like identity. We can think about identity as fixed, which is about beingness. You know, so for me, you know, I have a sense of my identity as a Sikh, a Punjabi, a male, heterosexual, which kind of, I think, has probably been relatively fixed over time. But there's another bit of me that is about becoming, about, you know, every day being something new, a kind of identity in flow. But I think a sense of belonging allows you to become. Yeah, it allows you to move from the being to the becoming. What inhibits belonging is that we're often positioned not as individual, unique human beings, which is where we want to be. That's the kind of point at which we want to be unique, is that we get positioned within a kind of a common sense discourse, if you like, of group belonging, of otherness. And there's plenty of work on otherness, the work of Derrida, for example, all about identities and other. Frantz Fanon talked a lot about that. And what otherness, and I suppose otherness, if it's a kind of equal relationship, it can be a wonderful affirmation of group identities. You know, and in that sense, I think celebration of all kinds of ethnic, cultural group identities is wonderful. That's kind of part of the kaleidoscope of what makes us who we are. But the tragedy is that I think, you know, often otherness isn't positioned, you're not positioned as the other in some kind of egalitarian relationship. It's often in a kind of relation of dominance and subjugation. And, you know, otherness that's and Herr Freire's work has really been important, and is that if you are positioned as dominant other, then you can begin to develop all kinds of blind spots about the kind of nature of dominance and oppression and disadvantage. You can also develop delusions of grandeur, that you are innately superior. And of course, the mirror image, the mirror reflection happens to those that are positioned as what post-colonial theorists call the subaltern, on the bottom side and below. And they will often end up internalizing this sense of inferiority, lack of ability, lack of even humanity, if you like, and that can have its effects. So, you know, to promote and create belonging, we have to also disrupt these insidious and oppressive relations of dominance and subjugation. And I think a lot of the work around decolonising the curriculum also, in an indirect way, is addressing this question. Decolonising, I don't think, is about, you know, stripping away colonialism so we get to some kind of pure Shangri-La moment in history. I don't think there ever has been a moment in history. I think history is often an unfolding of relations of dominance. But I think in a university, in the relatively protected space, we can construct a sense of being, sense of belonging, sense of identity and otherness in ways that's enriching and not you know, oppressive and damaging. In some senses, I think one is surprised that a university of arts would need to stop and ask those questions. Do you think that it be part of the DNA of the university? And that in itself raises certain questions about, you know, I would say how neoliberalisation of higher education itself has had a damaging effect. You know, I think that we live in a much more utilitarian kind of society and culture, and that then has seeped into the kind of organisational culture and maybe you know, the pedagogy that's practiced and developed in the university. But on the flip side is, it seems to me that because the whole mission of the University of Arts London is to be disruptive, is to encourage risk-taking, is to be creative, is to, as it were, let the subaltern speak, because how else can you produce great new art, culture, media, because the mass of the body is in the subaltern location. Then the possibilities are the greater for this university to be able to, I think, lead and to show, trailblaze for the rest of the sector.